We do every Tuesday, we welcome Jennifer Lawless from American University, the director of the Women in Politics Institute. Loves to give us the scoop of what's going on inside the Beltway. And we had basically our lineup of things to discuss today, and then all thrown in disarray by the recent press conference at the White House by Sean Spicer, talking about the president's actions against Syria and Assad, and made some very controversial statements comparing Assad to Hitler, saying Hitler didn't use chemical warfare on even his own people, in addition to a number of other statements that have rattled the news outlets and reaction from around the country and the world. So Jennifer, would love your take. Did you see it live, or were you just following the news when you saw it being broadcast?
I didn't see it live. I heard about it, and then I quickly watched it a couple of minutes after it happened. And frankly, it's horrifying on a number of levels, right? The first is to suggest that Hitler was better than someone is just not the path that you want to go down. If you don't want to judge dictators, you justify the atrocities one person is committing on his own people by a comparison to Hitler. But if you're going to do that, you should at least have correct information. And when asked to clarify, Spicer said that, well, Hitler brought people to Holocaust centers. I don't think that anybody has ever called a concentration camp a Holocaust center. And what's particularly damning to this administration is that comments like that are certainly consistent with a narrative that Steve Bannon and other high-ranking people at the White House are anti-Semitic. So the statements themselves are absurd, but I think they're going to do more damage than had they been uttered by different administrations.
Do you think Sean Spicer survives this? He's had a number of incidents that have gotten some rebuke and have sparked some controversy, but something like this, does he survive?
It's hard to know. There have been several times along the way where I would have thought that he wouldn't have made it, but his loyalty to Donald Trump and the fighting spirit that he has, the fact that he never apologizes, that he always doubles down, is very consistent with what we saw from Donald Trump on the campaign trail. So it might well be that this kind of style and the kind of tone that he strikes to Trump is more important than the substance of what he says.
Do you think that the president himself should be expected to respond to this? I can't imagine that he won't go someplace where press will press him on the comments made by one of his top-level officials. Do you think he'll say anything, or do you think he hopes this will die down, and will this die down?
Well, I think if asked, he has to comment, just because it's a crazy statement. And again, he's sort of dogged by Steve Bannon and allegations of anti-Semitism anyway, so this certainly doesn't play well as far as that's concerned. And keep in mind, this isn't the first time when Sean Spicer and others in the administration had talked about the Holocaust. They referenced the deaths of millions of people and had conveniently left out Jews. So this is not the first time that they have demonstrated at least sort of an inability to strike the right chord. They're very tone deaf when it comes to these issues. The other thing that I would note is that the Trump administration has an ability like nobody I've ever seen before to just create another crisis, even when they're not trying. So it may be that right now this seems like a huge PR problem, and by tomorrow at this time, no one's going to remember, because we can only imagine what's going to happen in the next 24 hours.
And I think that's something that we've certainly discussed in the past, sort of, will this be forgotten in this constant news cycle of sort of a big spike and then a lull? And, originally, before this had all shaken up today, my original question was going to be, sort of, what now? Or are we sort of in that post action in Syria? Are we still, is the fixation still so much internationally at this point, would you say? And, how does that play in with attention being paid to issues here domestically?
Well, I think it is still at play, and today we actually saw a couple of comments that are somewhat bizarre. Eric Trump, for example, said that part of the reason Donald Trump decided to respond in Syria was because Ivanka saw those images and they really touched her. That's not the kind of statement that we expect from a president's son, let alone the justification for intervening. We've also now seen Putin and Russia saying that the story is already conflated, that the United States and the Trump administration are actually putting out fake news, and that Russia was not colluding with Syria at all or covering anything up. And so as long as the Russians are involved, and as long as there are concerns about the relationship between Trump and Putin, it's hard to focus on anything domestically. Now, Congress is continuing to work behind closed doors to try and come up with some kind of health care deal. And tax reform is supposed to be around the bend, but it's very difficult to focus on those kinds of issues.
And talking about the international politics, let's talk inside the Beltway. Is there a concern for proliferation of military activity in other parts of the world? Actually, last Friday we had the opportunity to Skype in with Matt Fechtow, who was over in the Middle East, talked with us a little bit about Syria, asked him about some other hot spots. A lot of talk about North Korea. We had the opportunity to talk with someone at the Naval War College about that. Is there a concern that things can get ratcheted up at this point?
I think there is, and part of that concern has to do with partisan politics. So it turns out that about 37 or 38% of Democrats supported Barack Obama when he said that he might be willing to launch Tomahawk missiles or other missiles to deal with the Syrian humanitarian crisis. That same percentage of people support Donald Trump for doing the same thing. On the Republican side, though, we've seen a complete about face, whereas Republicans were in the single digits supporting Obama for that kind of intervention. 2/3, 75% are now supporting Trump, depending on the poll and the day. And so attitudes about intervention are really, really linked, especially among Republicans, to Donald Trump and what he's willing to do. And we also see that in the United States Congress. So there's an opportunity for ratcheting up, not only because there are hot spots across the globe, but also because partisan politics is now unified behind the Republican Party.
And I want to tack a little bit, you mentioned it a little bit before, sort of the role that Kushner plays, the role that Bannon plays. I mean, and we've talked about it in the past weeks. Are we seeing more of a emergence of sort of Kushner and Ivanka? Obviously we saw what happened with the Security Council with Bannon. Do we expect, as the same question I'd asked regarding Spicer, Bannon to be around in the long haul, or do we see sort of more of the familial, intervention sort of kind of creeping in there, and are they sort of pushing him out?
Well, I mean, the internal communications and sort of the gossip circles suggest that Breitbart has been trying to take down Jared Kushner for quite some time. Kushner finally complained, and I don't know if it was Kushner or Donald Trump who told Steve Bannon to kind of cut it out. If that's the case, it's clear that Kushner has the upper hand, and if Bannon crosses a line, that might be the end of it. The problem, of course, is that Bannon is a loose cannon and is also trying to wage a series of nationalist wars, right? And so is he safer within the administration when he's a Trump ally than when he's a Trump enemy? The one thing that's pretty clear is that both Bannon and Kushner have the president's ear far more than Rex Tillerson, who seems to be headed to Moscow and literally has no talking points. So, he left the G7 meeting. It's unclear where the United States stands. We're waiting for international investigations. There is no meeting with Putin, and it's not exactly clear what he's supposed to be carrying out on behalf of the administration.
I mean, obviously, things being what they are right now with the relations being heavily strained from Syria, Putin not meeting with Tillerson, as you said. So, I mean, do we expect anything to come of this, or is there just so much uncertainty that he could possibly go to Russia with very little outcome?
My sense is that nothing is going to come of it. The best case scenario is some form of paving over some ill will, or at least generating some sense of civility. Just because, it's pretty dangerous when we hear things coming out of Putin's mouth like these are the most hostile relations we've seen since the end of the Cold War.
Well, things are certainly heating up internationally, and I know you've got a busy schedule down there, so I did just want to ask you quickly, domestically, Kansas and Georgia, the elections taking place, what are we hearing?
Well, so these are two special elections where they're actually probably going to serve as bellwethers. These are deeply red districts, and the Democrats are polling within a couple of points of the Republicans. In Kansas, the special election is today. Donald Trump did a robocall on behalf of the Republican candidate. The latest poll shows that he's only up by 1 point. If the Democrat is able to win that seat, then the Democrats are going to make the case that this is a repudiation of Trump and the Trump agenda. And that bodes well for Georgia, whose special election is next week. The downside, of course, for the Democrats is that these are very, very red districts. And it's virtually impossible for a Democrat to win. So they need to be careful in terms of setting expectations, because they don't want to suggest to the rest of the country, and especially people in swing districts, that the Democrats can't be competitive. So I wouldn't be surprised if Republicans hold on in both cases, but there's no question that the races will be tighter than would have otherwise been the case.
Well, I think, between international relations to domestic, I know that we went over a little bit in the lifestyle hour, Jennifer. So anything you want to add before you have to take off? As I said, I know you gotta hit the road.
The one thing I would add that I think we should all start watching for are renewed calls from high-ranking elected officials for Donald Trump's tax returns, because Chuck Schumer has already made it clear that tax reform is a non-starter unless Donald Trump releases those returns. And so I think it's just going to be like Groundhog Day. It's whenever there's a lull, we go back to the tax returns. My bet is that for the next several weeks, that's what we're going to be hearing time and time again.
That's going to be a focus from the Democrats. Well, Jennifer Lawless, always appreciate your Skyping in from D.C. I know you've got a lot going on down there, so I'm going to let you hit the road. And I know we're not actually going to be able to talk with you next week, so who knows what's going to happen 2 weeks from now, but we always appreciate getting your take up here in Rhode Island as to what's happening down inside the Beltway. Jennifer Lawless, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay. That was Jennifer Lawless down at American